Hello, in this video, I'll talk about the quarterly and annual payroll forms and how payroll accountants reconcile the payroll and employee earnings to these payroll filings. It's best to get it right from the start, have a rigorous process in place and tight internal controls because few things are as stressful as having to correct payroll filings and year-end Form W-2s. Quarterly filings include Form 941, the employer's quarterly federal tax return, as well as the quarterly state and local filings, like, for instance, the California quarterly Form DE9. There may be other quarterly local filings that are required, so it's best to research the required filings thoroughly. Annually, employers complete Form 940, the employer's annual federal unemployment FUTA tax return, the Form 944, employer's annual federal tax return for annual filers, Form W-2's wage and tax statement, and Form W-3 transmittal of wage and tax statements. In addition, there are annual state and local filings that need to be completed as well. Let's look at the quarterly filings first so that you have a good understanding how the quarterly filings and reports are the basis for the annual filings. The starting point for the quarterly filings is the payroll register and the employee earnings records. The payroll register lists the payroll gross pay, withholdings, and net pay by payroll period. Whereas the employee earnings record lists the payroll gross, withholdings, and net pay by employee. The grand total for the payroll register should equal the grand total for the employee earnings record. That is really important because for purposes of the quarterly and annual tax filings, we will use the payroll register. However, to prepare the Form W-2s and W-3s, at year end, we use the employee earnings record. And all reports have to be in sync or the business will receive tax notices and employees will be upset if W-2s need to be revised. In our case, we have quarterly payroll of $75,000 for 4 employees, pre-tax deductions for 401k of $3,000. Federal withholdings, tax withholdings of $5,180.22, Social Security $4,650, Medicare tax of $1,087.50, state tax withholdings of $2,210.40, and net pay of $58,871.88. My recommendation is that you double check that the gross to net math is correct. So start with a net pay and add all of the deductions, and that should be your gross pay. Quite often, I've received payroll reports that for one reason or another, initially did not have all withholdings listed accurately or completely. So before you get started, it's good to verify that you truly have all of the information you need. And as I mentioned, make sure that the grand totals for these two reports match. Next, we need the amounts for the monthly payroll tax deposits the company made, and we need to verify that they're accurate. The employee withholding total is $10,917.72, and the Social Security and Medicare tax employer match are $5,737.50 for a combined total deposit of $16,655.22. We're now ready to complete Form 941 Employer's Quarterly Federal Tax Return by completing the header information with the employer tax ID, name and address, as well as marking the box that shows January, February, and March. Next, we continue with line 1, where we enter 4 for the number of employees. On line 2, we enter gross pay less pre-tax deductions, so $75,000 minus $3,000 for the 401k for $72,000. The federal income tax withheld of $5,180.22 is entered on line 3, and line 5A and C, column 1, contain the taxable Social Security and Medicare wages of $75,000. This amount is $75,000 and not $72,000 because the 401k pre-tax deductions do not reduce the Social Security and Medicare taxable wages. Then we multiply the wages in column 1 by 12.4% for Social Security and 2.9% for Medicare tax. This represents both the employee and the employer share of the Social Security and Medicare tax. Combined, that's $11,475, which is entered on line 5E. Combined with federal income tax, the total is $16,655.22. If there are any adjustments, such as errors, rounding, etc., you'd enter that on lines 7, 8, or 9. The total taxes after adjustments is $16,655.22 and listed on line 10. We enter the deposits made of $16,655.22 on line 13 and calculate the balance due of $0 on line 14. In this example, we also have state taxes, and you would follow a similar process to submit the state tax filings each quarter. And you would continue to follow this process each quarter until year end, when we'll also add the annual filings for Form W-2s and Form W-3. At year end, we review the total payroll register and compare it to the employee earnings record. All Form 941 filings must agree with the grand totals, and only then can we move on to preparing the year-end employee wage statements, the Form W-2s, and the Form W-3 based on the employee earnings record. Keep in mind that the federal and state governments will do that same comparison that you're doing. And if there is a variance between the total of all Form 941 filings, as well as the total of all state and local filings to the Form W-2s, then it is very likely that you will receive notices from these agencies requesting a correction. Here's one version of the Form W-2. Employers may use different formats, but the important thing is that the form has the same required information. There are multiple copies of the same form, each for a different government agency, as well as the employee and the employer. The Social Security Administration offers an online service for employers with 50 or less Form W-2s, and there are other payroll services that also offer to print or electronically produce your company's Form W-2. We'll complete the 4 Form W-2s for the employer in our example. The first W-2 is for Alice Johnson. Box A contains her Social Security number, and Box B, the employer tax ID number. The name and address of the company is listed in Box C. Box 1 contains the federal taxable wages for the employee. That means gross pay less pre-tax deductions. For Alice, the gross pay was $60,000 minus $2,400 for the 401 pre-tax deduction. Box 2 contains the withheld federal income tax. Box 3 and 5 contain the Social Security and Medicare taxable wages. The 401k pre-tax deduction does not reduce Social Security and Medicare taxable wages, and that is why the Box 3 and 5 equal Alice's gross pay. Box 4 and 6 contain the Social Security tax of $3,720 and Medicare tax of $870. We put an X in the box for retirement because the company offers a 401k, and enter D and $2,400 for the 401k in box 12A. Box 15 contains the state abbreviation and the employer's state tax ID number. Box 16 is the state taxable wages of $57,600, and box 17 is the state tax withheld for Alice of $1,768.32. The other Form W-2s are for Bob Smith, Kathy Lee, and David Brown. To double check that all amounts were entered correctly, you can add up the total wages and taxes and double check them against the employee earnings record, the Form 941s, and state tax returns that were filed throughout the year. It's better to be safe than sorry. If you have a lot of Form W-2s, sample check several Form W-2s. Once all amounts have been checked and you feel confident that everything is as it should be, the business prepares the Form W-3, which is the transmittal form for the submission of Copy A to the Social Security Administration. It contains the grand total for all W-2s issued by an employer. The Form W-3 and all accompanying W-2s must be mailed or electronically transmitted by January 31st of the following year. The total annual wages reported on the W-3 must match the annual wages reported on Forms 941 and 940. Here's an example. In box B, the company checks what kind of payer it is. In this case, the company files a Form 941. Companies also check a box for the type of employer or non-apply. In box C, we enter the number of Form W-2s that are attached and fill in the employer ID number in box E and the employer's name and address in box F and G. We need to add up all the wages, taxes, and deferred compensation and fill them in boxes 1 through 19. In the last two rows of the form, the company fills in the employer's contact person as well as the phone number, fax number, and email address. The form must be signed and dated by an authorized individual and then submitted to the Social Security Administration. That brings us to the end of this video, and I hope this video helped you learn about the quarterly and annual payroll filings and why it is so important to ensure that all payroll reports match to the quarterly and annual filings.